My wife, Illyra, was shattered by the simultaneous deaths of her mother and her paramour. They were discovered in a compromising position inside a vehicle, consumed by a fire that left nothing but ash. Racked by gasping sobs, she clung to me, whispering that I was all she had left in the world. I held her, but I'd been aware for some time that the fire, ruled as a tragic mishap, was the very surprise she had intended for me. As I crumpled another aluminum can, the 13th that evening, a glowing crimson beacon on my car's GPS pulsed over the Grand Imperial Hotel in the city's new development zone. On the passenger seat beside me lay Illyra's designer handbag. Peeking from an inner pocket was an embossed keycard for Suite 328, the logo of Julian's Elite Fitness printed beneath the room number. A faint dusting of chalky protein powder still clung to its edge. I'm taking my friend Sophia to see the new Christopher Nolan film at IMAX, so don't bother staying up for me. That was Illyra's explanation 3 hours prior, delivered as she applied a dark, expensive lipstick I had bought for her. The cloying fusion of cherry and the sandalwood from her hair now filled me with a nauseating disgust. The windshield wipers, even at their highest speed, fought a losing battle against the torrential rain. Through the deluge, I could see the large window of room 328, situated one floor above the hotel's main entrance, cast in the soft, yellow glow of a lamp. The sheer curtain was billowed outward by a gust of wind. "Julian, you didn't draw the curtains," Illyra's voice, faint and carried on the rain-swept wind, reached my ears. I lifted my high-powered binoculars. Through the lenses, a fresh bruise on her collarbone was starkly visible. When I had inquired about it this morning, she'd casually dismissed it as an injury from a yoga ball. The truth was far more sordid. She was currently entangled with Julian in that hotel room. Rain spattered the lenses, and I wiped them furiously with my sleeve, the sound of my teeth grinding together audible even over the storm. "What's the status of the divorce we discussed?" Julian's voice murmured. Illyra's laugh mingled with a peal of thunder. "I'm not planning on a divorce. I'm aiming for widowhood, as soon as that fool's accident insurance policy clears its waiting period." I hit the record button. Illyra turned towards the window, and I instinctively recoiled into the shadows of my car. "I think I see a reflection," she said, pulling a thin blanket over the window. Julian chuckled dismissively. "Who would possibly follow you in a storm like this? Your clueless tech nerd husband is probably stuck at his office, writing code." The light in Suite 328 went out. I transferred the video file to a portable drive. As I went to start the car, I realized my hands were trembling so violently I could barely insert the key. The car's Bluetooth system suddenly came to life, blasting "Marry Me," the song Illyra had chosen as my ringtone when we were married. "This song is just perfect for a straight-laced guy like you," she had whispered, nibbling my ear. I slammed my fist onto the steering wheel, the car horn blaring through the rain. "The day of the ancestors is approaching, and this straight-laced tech nerd is about to send you both to hell." That night, I chain-smoked through the night, the glowing embers of my cigarettes piercing the darkness. Just before dawn, Illyra returned home, looking utterly exhausted. She slipped the key to her luxury sedan into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. Her usual perfume had been replaced by a heavy cedar scent, but it failed to mask the lingering smell of a man's cologne on the cuffs of her blouse. "I stayed over at my best friend's place," she lied smoothly. "The dealership called and said the car's transmission is acting up. Could you take it in to get checked?" As she spoke, she reached up to adjust my tie, her movements practiced and casual. The love bites on her collarbone were now carefully hidden beneath a layer of foundation. "And while you're out, please pick up my mink coat from the dry cleaners." I gave a vacant nod. Deception, after all, was a game we were both playing. I drove the sedan slowly towards the Cross-Sea Bridge. As expected, the brakes suddenly seized. The dashboard lit up with a warning: transmission fluid overheating. The acrid smell of burning filled the cabin as blue smoke billowed from the car's undercarriage. With practiced calm, I reached under the driver's seat and activated a hidden device, a kill switch for the fuel line I had installed the previous week. It saved my life. 3 months ago, upon discovering the affair between Illyra and Julian, I started monitoring their activities. That's when I uncovered an even more shocking secret: Julian was also involved with my mother-in-law, Isabel, and Illyra was completely unaware. One night, concealed by a blind spot in the surveillance cameras, I witnessed my mother-in-law, Isabel, inject a substance into the car's brake hydraulics. "Is this enough to send him plunging into the ocean?" she asked Julian. "To make him food for the fishes?" Julian's reply was chillingly sweet. "Once he's gone, Illyra will inherit 3 prime properties and millions from his estate. And since she isn't even your biological child, if we eliminate her next, we'll be free to escape together." Julian and Isabel then erupted in shared, sinister laughter. Later, traffic investigators would recover the mangled brake pump from the vehicle. Forensic analysis would detect a high concentration of dimethyl silicone oil, an industrial lubricant used exclusively at Julian's gym. The evidence was undeniable: they were actively trying to murder me. The only path forward now was all-out war. Illyra, Illyra. When you discover that Isabel is not your birth mother, when you realize she was also sleeping with Julian, what expression will you wear? I can hardly wait to see it. I first met Illyra at 3 o'clock in the morning, shortly after the company's main server had gone down. She was a junior auditor at the time, crouched in the hallway outside the server room, eating a sandwich. A small smudge of frosting at the corner of her mouth reminded me of a stray cat from my childhood. That night, it took me precisely 47 minutes to restore the system, my primary motivation being to get her home sooner. "Liam, you're a wizard with technology," she'd said. Beneath the coffee cup she handed me, she had placed 2 tickets to a movie. In the dim light of the cinema, I took her hand in mine. My first encounter with her mother, Isabel, was in the late autumn of 2018. She took the expensive tea I had brought as a gift and ran a manicured finger over the price tag. "Mr. Wang is a programmer, I understand," she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "The kind who fixes computers?" She then unceremoniously dropped the box of tea into a wastebasket, the resulting splashback dirtying my Italian leather loafers, which had cost me 3 months' salary. She then used a lavish cigarette holder to poke at a fresh fish my father had brought. "A common fisherman from a backwater village wants to be my relative?" The blood from the fish's gills stained her perfect manicure. It poured rain on our wedding day. Illyra insisted on a strapless gown. Just below her collarbone, she had a tattoo of my initials, which Isabel promptly covered with a heavy shawl. The officiant instructed me to kneel and serve tea to my new mother-in-law. The moment my fingers brushed the porcelain cup, Isabel snatched her hand away. "Do all the men in your family beg for handouts?" she asked loudly, prompting a wave of laughter from the guests. I glanced over at my father's table. His hands, chapped and red from a lifetime of hard labor, were nervously rubbing together. He was clutching a red envelope containing 8,888 yuan, money he had saved by selling his entire sugarcane harvest. "Please, honored in-law, accept the tea," my father said, bowing low as he offered the cup. Isabel's mink coat brushed against his cracked fingernails. "I hear your village only recently got internet access," she remarked, her voice sharp with ridicule. "That must be why young Liam here is so preoccupied with the Wi-Fi password." A videographer nearby stifled a laugh so hard his camera shook. Illyra squeezed my hand under the table. There was a fresh cut on her palm from a picture frame we had shattered during an argument the night before. "My mother is just looking out for your best interests," she had cried then. Now, that cut felt like a shard of glass lodged in my heart. During the wedding toast, Isabel stopped a waiter. "Replace all the house wine with this," she said, pointing to a rare vintage on the menu. "Put it on young Liam's bill." I stared at the price, 28,888 yuan per bottle. Illyra rushed to intervene. "Mother, Liam's company just had a round of employee investment, he's a little short on cash right now." Isabel cut her off. "So what if he's investing? Do you really think his meager salary will ever amount to anything? He's like your father's old Doberman, all bark, but a coward at heart." Later that night, I crouched in an alley behind the hotel, vomiting until I saw stars. When Illyra found me, my phone was illuminated with a text message from her mother. "Illyra, no wedding night for you. Uncle Moo's son just returned from Cambridge. Put on the red dress I bought you and go meet him." Illyra hesitated for a long moment, but in the end, she did not leave. I paid for our marital home entirely on my own. For the first few years of our marriage, we were deeply infatuated, and I poured all my energy into my work to provide her with an increasingly comfortable life. But everything shifted the moment she became obsessed with fitness. She started commuting every day in Julian's car. She claimed he was just her trainer offering a friendly ride, but I recently reviewed the dashcam footage and discovered they had braked erratically over a dozen times along the Riverside Drive. On another occasion, while performing maintenance on her computer, I discovered a concealed folder on her hard drive. Inside was a high-definition video of Julian's powerful biceps squeezing the bruises on her waist. What truly solidified my murderous resolve, however, was discovering the life insurance documents. Illyra had covertly altered the recipient of my accidental death policy, changing it from spouse to my mother-in-law, Isabel. She then embedded the notarized document within the blockchain code I was developing late one night. They were preparing to murder me and seize my assets. It's true that my career had flourished in recent years. The software I developed had become highly profitable, and with my founder's shares, my net worth was in the tens of millions. I had finally achieved financial success, but in the process, I had lost the woman I loved. The following day, thanks to the spyware I had installed on Illyra's phone, I learned of their next scheme. "He was lucky to survive the brake failure," Julian murmured. Illyra's jade bracelet tapped against a marble countertop. After a long pause, she said, "Honestly, if I just filed for a divorce, he would still be legally obligated to give me half of everything." Julian scoffed. "Why settle for half when you can have it all? What about the plan with the electrified swimming pool?" I increased the gain on the audio amplifier and heard Isabel join the conversation. "That fool's home safe is fireproof. We need him to open it willingly. We have to secure his shares and other assets first." She then added casually, or we could orchestrate a home invasion during a storm. Julian laughed. We could feed him tetrodotoxin from a blowfish. Didn't you acquire some sort of radiological agent as well? We could fake a cancer diagnosis caused by radiation poisoning. Isabel giggled. The more we discuss it, the more outlandish it sounds. Let's just tamper with the car again. He's already had one accident. I'll convince him to buy a new luxury car, and we'll sabotage that one. He'll never know what hit him. Julian laughed in agreement. He's visiting his mother's grave in a few days, isn't he? It's the perfect opportunity for a little family reunion. Illyra seemed hesitant. Maybe we should just drop the whole thing. But Isabel and Julian's derision quickly silenced her. I saved the entire audio recording and uploaded it to a secure cloud server. Beside me, my printer produced 3 blank coroner's reports, each corresponding to the deaths they had plotted for me: cardiac arrest via electrocution, respiratory failure from neurotoxin poisoning, and a body incinerated in an arson fire. In my basement workshop, sticks of incense laced with white phosphorus were being formed by a 3D printer, a rewired therapeutic massager was charging, and a pufferfish floated placidly in a tank. All of these items were destined to become the nails in their coffins. The flashing lights of a passing patrol car illuminated the room as I swallowed my 4th breath mint. The cold sensation slid down my throat like a sharpened blade being drawn from its sheath. They had provoked a programmer. And they were all going straight to hell. The 3 methods of death they had conceived for me were now my own instruments of retribution. But since they were still intent on my demise, I had to be meticulously prepared. While they were at home, scheming, I went directly to the gym where Julian worked. The locker room was a blind spot for security cameras. On the interior of the 3rd locker, the one Julian used, traces of dried sweat still lingered. Using a latex mold I had created of his fingerprint, I easily bypassed the keypad lock. I placed my modified massage gun into its charging cradle, where its internal capacitor salvaged from a discarded defibrillator began to accumulate a powerful electric charge. 12 volts, more than enough to induce cardiac arrest through damp skin. On the stationary bike that only Julian ever used, I altered a resistor, locking its output at his typical 300-watt setting. When Julian gripped the handlebars, a conductive medium would seep from the heart rate sensors. At precisely the 45-minute mark of his workout, the point at which he would reach his maximum oxygen uptake, the capacitor's stored energy would surge through the bike's electrical system. The medical examiner would find only the classic signs of a heart attack induced by extreme physical stress. My involvement would be untraceable. When I returned home, Julian had already left. Isabel offered me a condescending smile. "I'll be taking your new car for a while," she announced, crossing her arms. "Go and purchase another one for yourself, the same model will do." I nodded and smiled back. "Mother, you always look out for me." Illyra stood to the side, her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes darting nervously. "A man must have his pride," Isabel snorted. "After all the years you've toiled for this family, consider it a small reward." I nodded again and retreated to the bedroom. I could hear the mother and daughter whispering in the living room. I noticed that Illyra's favorite tube of lipstick was nearly empty. Using a syringe, I carefully injected 0.3 ml of a potent neurotoxin extracted from a fugu into a brand new tube of the same shade. A single gram of this purified poison is lethal to hundreds, but in microdoses, it causes a slow paralysis of the respiratory muscles. When she applies the lipstick and habitually licks her lips, the toxin will be absorbed into her bloodstream through the capillaries. The resulting shortness of breath will send her to the emergency room, where, given her history of asthma, doctors will prescribe an inhaler. They will be unaware that the medication will actually accelerate the toxin's effect on her system. This, too, would have no connection to me. Next, I went to the villa's ancestral hall. Before the memorial tablet of my late father-in-law, I sprinkled powdered white phosphorus into the incense burner. Kneeling on a cushion, I used my phone to increase the temperature of the underfloor heating to 28 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the phosphorus dust would spontaneously ignite after 72 hours, and the ethanol gel-treated carpet would flash into flames at precisely 65 degrees Celsius. I could already envision the sequence of events. As Julian collapses at the gym, the facility's backup power will activate. Staff will frantically try to revive him, shouting for an ambulance. I could see Illyra in the hospital, gasping for breath, a spiderweb of rashes appearing on her neck, mistaken for an allergic reaction. I would be there to gently pat her back and offer her a glass of water. I could even picture the moment the white phosphorus ignites, turning the entire house into a crematorium. Isabel would be consumed by the flames while dancing a graceful waltz in the villa. Julian's death certificate would read sudden cardiac death, no electrical burns detected. Illyra's severe asthma attack with respiratory failure, toxin metabolites attributed to a seafood allergy. Isabel's body would show classic signs of fire damage. All 3 deaths would be officially unconnected to me. The only potential flaw in my plan was the close proximity in time of these accidents involving people closely associated with me. But that was a risk I had to take. They wanted me dead, and my patience was wearing thin. During the day, I returned to my company, cashed out my entire stock portfolio, and wired tens of millions of dollars to my father's bank account. Then, I sat and waited for the game to unfold. But as evening approached, the situation changed. Julian didn't go to the gym. Ilora never applied the poisoned lipstick. And my mother-in-law had left the house. Guided by the location tracker on Isabel's phone, I slipped into a custom car garage late that night. Peering through a ventilation duct, I watched as Julian injected industrial-grade silicone fluid into the brake reservoir of a car. Isabel's mink coat was draped over a nearby hydraulic lift. "Darling," Julian said, "there can be no mistakes this time. As soon as he brings the new car home, I'll ensure he drives this one." Isabel replied, "Don't worry. The winding mountain road on the Day of the Ancestors is the perfect location." Julian let out a chilling laugh. "It's foolproof, just like when we disposed of your husband 3 years ago." He continued, "Ilora is your late husband's child, not yours. There's no reason to leave her any of the inheritance. When this is all over, we'll run away together." I narrowed my eyes. The police report on my father-in-law's death had cited overheated brakes as the cause. Now, they were meticulously recreating the very circumstances of his murder. "Ilora, you are a complete and utter fool." Early the next morning, I picked up a duplicate luxury sedan and parked it in front of the house. Isabel's eyes gleamed with avarice. "Liam, this new car is stunning. Let me drive it," she said, her lips curling into a smile. "You're visiting the cemetery today, so you can take the old one." She then added, "Ilora and I are going to visit her father's grave as well. We'll take this brand new car." I glanced at the sabotaged vehicle and gave a slight nod. Ilora shot me a look of apprehension. "Are you certain you want to drive that car?" she asked. Isabel frowned and pushed Ilora back into the house. I drove the tampered Mercedes away from the villa. What they didn't realize was that I had exchanged the vehicles under the cover of darkness. The car I was currently driving was, in fact, the new one. I had merely added a few scratches to the paint. The car remaining at the villa was the real target, which I had resprayed to look like the old one. It was a classic misdirection, designed to let them fall into their own trap. As I cautiously navigated the road to the cemetery, I heard a strange sound coming from the live audio feed on my phone. To my astonishment, Ilora had not accompanied Isabel to the grave. Julian had gone in her place. In the dense morning fog of the Day of the Ancestors, Isabel's red Mercedes ascended the winding mountain pass. In the passenger seat, Julian sat with his eyes closed. "Slow down," he murmured. "We have plenty of time. Once he's dead, everything he owns will be ours." "I want this to be exhilarating," Isabel replied, pressing the accelerator. The oil temperature gauge on the dashboard shot into the red. At a sharp hairpin turn near the mountain's peak, Julian suddenly sniffed the air. The industrial silicone fluid was boiling within the brake lines, and the steering wheel began to shake violently. The screech of metal grinding against metal filled the air. Isabel's eyes widened in horror. The moment the car crashed through the safety barrier, the overheated silicone ignited, and the vehicle exploded in a massive fireball. By the time the fire department arrived, 2 incinerated bodies were discovered locked in a final, macabre embrace. When Ilora and I reached the scene, she stood in stunned silence, whispering, "This can't be happening, this can't be happening." The police captain in charge of the investigation declared it an accident. "This is the 3rd luxury car fire this month," he grumbled, stubbing out his cigarette. "These people play too recklessly." Amidst the wreckage, Isabel's jade bracelet lay untouched, the inscription on its inner surface now glazed a blood red from the intense heat. Ilora continued to mutter, "Impossible, how could they have been together?" She then collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Isabel's memorial service was held 3 days later. I deliberately wore the charcoal gray suit she had always despised. "Mother was always so particular about cleanliness," Ilora said. "Darling, please make sure your suit is properly brushed." When she handed me the funerary urn, her gaze darted away. In the past, she would have demanded I kowtow, but not now. Julian was no relation of mine, so I had no obligation to attend his cremation. At the morgue, Ilora pressed her lips together, then suddenly looked up at me, a deep frown creasing her forehead. "Liam, do you know something?" I shrugged. "Know what? That your personal trainer was having an affair with your mother? Please." Ilora's mouth twitched, her eyes filled with a dawning terror. "It was you," she shrieked, grabbing the sleeve of a nearby detective's uniform. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station, her composure shattered completely. I instinctively touched the burn scar on my hand, a memento from 3 years ago when she had accidentally spilled scalding soup on me. The audio from the dashcam played in the interrogation room. Isabel and Julian's sordid conversation, punctuated by the roar of the engine. "Ms. Liu," the detective said coolly, prying her trembling hand from his arm. "Toxicology reports show the same class of amphetamines in both your mother's and Mr. Ito's systems." He displayed a photo of a pill bottle. "Imported by Julian Ito." Ilora froze. She recognized the bottle. Julian had given her one just like it. "No, that's not possible." she stammered, backing away until she bumped into an evidence cart, sending its contents crashing to the floor. She then grabbed a heavy glass ashtray and hurled it at me. I dodged, and it shattered against the wall, the flying shards reminiscent of wedding confetti. "You monster! You murdered my mother," she howled, her face contorted with rage. The detective finally lost his patience. "Ms. Liu, calm down. The case is closed." He slid his pen into his pocket. "Mr. Wang, you are free to go." He deliberately left the final report on the table, the last page containing the fire investigators' findings circled in red ink. Ignition temperature of ethanol gel carpet lowered by moisture, static discharge cannot be ruled out as a cause. As I passed Illyra, she clutched at my pant leg. "If I had been in that car," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I would be the one who is dead, wouldn't I?" I gently helped her to her feet. "You are my wife, Illyra. I would never let anything happen to you. We still have our entire lives ahead of us." She shrank back in terror, staring at me as if I were a demon. Isabel had left behind almost no savings. The entire inheritance from Illyra's father had been squandered on Julian. For years, her entire family had drained my resources like leeches. If Illyra were to leave me now, she would be left with nothing. She followed me home, trembling. "I've been the biggest fool," she said with a bitter laugh. I nodded and played the surveillance footage on the living room television, the hotel room encounters with Julian, the whispered conspiracies between Julian and Isabel. Everything was laid bare. Illyra's eyes widened in disbelief. "Yes, quite foolish," I said, spreading my hands. "And you're not even Isabel's biological daughter." My investigation had revealed that Illyra was her father's child from a previous relationship. Her birth mother had died in an accident, and Isabel had married her father when Illyra was only 2. Unable to have children of her own and consumed by bitterness, Isabel had conspired with Julian. They murdered Mr. Liu, then arranged for Julian to seduce Illyra with the ultimate goal of killing us both and absconding with the fortune. Illyra sank to the floor, wailing. Clutching my leg, she sobbed, "Liam, I was wrong. My greed blinded me. They manipulated me. I never truly wanted to harm you. Please, forgive me." I simply smiled. She began to kowtow, her forehead hitting the floor repeatedly. "Don't leave me, please. Don't hurt me," she cried. I stroked her hair. "I love you more than anything, Illyra. Why would I ever hurt you? We have a lifetime of fun to look forward to." Her mouth fell open, unable to comprehend my intentions. I smiled again. Allowing her to exist in a state of perpetual fear and remorse was a punishment far more severe than death. I placed Julian's urn in the center of the dining table. Illyra's jade bangle clinked against her porcelain bowl as she ate. She stared at the particles of protein powder remnants swept from Julian's gym bag floating in her rice porridge. "The registrar's office opens at 9, I said casually. "Perhaps we should finalize that divorce today." I scooped a spoonful of protein from the urn and sprinkled it into her bowl. This was the 37th time I had brought up the subject of divorce. Her tears fell onto the face of her watch, precisely at the 9 o'clock mark. "Husband, I was wrong," she whispered, gripping my sleeve, her nails digging into the 3-year-old burn scar on my hand. I pulled the urn back, spilling some of its contents onto her slippers. The camera in the living room is concealed within her vanity mirror. Directly in its view, I tore open the collar of her blouse and sank my teeth into the spot on her collarbone where Julian had left his mark. "Let's see if Julian can hear that," I said. She convulsed, while in the background, smoke from the incense curled upwards, and the memorial photograph of Isabel seemed to smile. Day by day, Illyra's health deteriorated. Her skin grew sallow, her figure became bloated, and strangers on the street would point and whisper. Night after night, she would scrub at the phantom bite marks on her skin until she would kneel before me, begging, "Please, husband, commit me to a psychiatric hospital. I can't endure this any longer." I opened the safe. Inside, she saw a stack of 100 unsigned divorce papers and shrieked, tearing them to shreds. The night I cancelled all of her credit cards, I laid out copies of Isabel's will in the bathtub. As she soaked in a bath of chemical bleach, Illyra counted the inheritance figures. 37,000 yuan, I said. "That's the burial fund your mother set aside for you." I activated the whirlpool jets, the churning water rising over a burned scar on her chest, a relic from a failed self-immolation attempt. On the night of the winter solstice, we sat on the deck of a yacht I had chartered for our anniversary. In the sky above, a projector played the video of her and Julian in the car, the reflections from her jade bangle flashing like a coded message. "Let's get a divorce," I said, for the 200th time. She suddenly lunged towards the yacht's propeller. I yanked her back. She laughed, a childlike sound of discovery. "Husband, you can't bring yourself to do it," she said. "You're not finished tormenting me yet." That night, she slipped into my room once more. "Darling," she asked, "do you like my new, provocative fragrance?" Illyra eased a strap of her nightgown down her arm, the bruise on her knee brushing against the laptop where I was working on a new coding project. It was her 7th attempt to thaw the icy distance between us with her body, a desperate echo of our first clandestine encounter in the university computer lab years ago. I removed my blue light blocking glasses. The lines of code flickered in her pupils. "Did Julian see you in that outfit too?" I asked. The carefully applied highlighter on her cheeks seemed to crack along with her frozen expression, like the glaze on a shattered piece of porcelain. Surveillance footage from that same night showed her swallowing half a bottle of melatonin. Yet, before the drug could take full effect, she had dashed to the neighborhood's communal trash area, frantically clawing through garbage to retrieve the wedding photos I had discarded. A security guard's body cam captured the moment a feral cat scratched her face, the beginning of her physical decline. Her medical records from the city hospital documented 27 visits during that period. The doctors diagnosed her with psychosomatic hives and neurodermatitis, but a pathologist's note read, "Patient exhibits a persistent tendency to pick at facial skin, possible self-harm ideation." She turned to alcohol. The empty bottles in her recycling bin still contained traces of minoxidil, a hair growth formula she mixed with vodka. Doctors informed her that the concoction was accelerating the mass death of her hair follicles. At a class reunion, she wore a wig. When one of her false eyelashes fell into a soup tureen, her former friend switched to whispering about her in English. While she was vomiting in the restroom, a waiter I had bribed accidentally drenched her coat, causing a falsified medical report indicating an HIV-positive status to fall out. On the day Illyra died, she was wearing the same lace lingerie from our first night together. The autopsy revealed her stomach was filled with soil. The last photo on her phone was a screenshot from an aging simulation app, with the caption, "Darling, look, I've completed my journey for you, ahead of schedule." The coroner's final determination was a complete psychotic break induced by sustained psychological distress. The night I married into the Liu family, 2-year-old Illyra sat in the middle of our bridal bed, clutching a baby bottle. The toddler with the expensive, hand-embroidered bedsheets, and my new husband, Martin, simply laughed. "Excellent. She'll soon have a little brother to play with." My infertility was a constant, choking presence. Every week, Martin would take me to the hospital for ovulation-inducing injections. The nurses would eye me with pity, one of them whispering, "Mrs. Liu, your husband's sperm count is perfectly normal." I knew that behind my back, they called me the barren wife. On New Year's Eve of 2000, a drunken Martin hoisted Illyra into the air and slurred, "How about my little princess inherits the family business?" I smashed my champagne flute. The shards of glass digging into my foot were less painful than his words. The first time I laid eyes on Julian, he was coaching a wealthy socialite at the most exclusive gym in the city. At 24, his sculpted, glistening body moved with the grace of a panther. "Madam, you need to correct your anterior pelvic tilt," he said, and when his palm touched the small of my back, I smelled the scent of cedar beneath his sweat. That day, I purchased 50 personal training sessions, my hand trembling so much that I entered the wrong pin 3 times. During our first tryst in the locker room, he bit my ear and whispered, "Martin's time is up." I clawed at his back, my nails filling with blood and plaster dust. It was bright and sunny on the day Martin died. Julian met me in the garage, wearing surgical gloves as he made adjustments to the car's brake pads. "Once we have the inheritance," he said, brushing a raindrop from my eyelashes, "I'll take you to see the ocean in Mauritius." When Martin's luxury sedan crashed into an oil tanker, I was at home, trying on morning clothes. The firefighters said the body was burned so severely that only a platinum wedding ring remained. I slipped off my matching ring and flushed it down a toilet at the gym. At Illyra's 28th birthday party, I tucked Julian's business card into her designer handbag. "A girl needs a perfect posterior if she wants to keep a man's attention," I told her, personally changing her into a pair of yoga pants so tight they left bruises on her waist. The security feed showed Julian pinning Illyra against a stationary bike while I was in the corner, applying a seductive shade of lipstick. I allowed Illyra to become part of our scheme solely because of her husband Liam's growing fortune. I would stare at the safe in their bedroom. His stock certificates had to be inside, while my reflection in the window showed a woman of 52 who could still drive a man like Julian to madness. "Are you truly prepared to go this far?" Julian asked me. Outside, a torrential downpour battered my son-in-law's brand new car, its dashcam's red light blinking like the flatlining ECG of Illyra's father in his final moments. That wedding 5 years ago should have marked the end. I can still picture Liam kneeling on the aisle, the shoulders of his inexpensive suit wrinkled. His father's hand trembled as he clutched a cheap imitation jade bracelet. Yet, Illyra clung to Liam's arm, declaring she would marry no one else. After meeting Julian, my money began to disappear at an alarming rate, so I set my sights on Liam. Who could have predicted he would become so successful, coding his way to the top of the AI industry? It was better to have him disappear. Julian tested the waters. What about a crash on the overpass? My fee for tampering with the brakes must be considered part of the inheritance. Illyra's mouth twitched in terror. That was the moment our conspiracy was officially born. "Use a proxy for the deed," Julian had said. "Ensure no identifiable remains are left. Yet, as the flames consumed the car with Julian and me inside, I finally noticed the small photocharm hanging from the rearview mirror, a picture of Illyra and Liam. As the stench of burning flesh filled my nostrils, I could almost hear Martin laughing. Lifting one of Julian's fingernail clippings with a pair of tweezers, I suddenly recalled the sheer lacquer he had first applied to my toenails a year ago. He had been kneeling on a yoga mat, his fingers brushing against my ankle as if by accident. "Miss Lou, your arch is exquisite," he had murmured. That nail polish and Julian himself had been a birthday gift from my mother, a top-tier VIP membership at the gym, personal trainer included. In the video now playing on the screen, he was appraising my body as if unboxing a long-awaited delivery. "Your husband stares at code all day," Julian had said. "What would he know of true beauty?" Mother slid a Porsche key into the ignition. "Wear the backless dress I bought you to the gala next week." The car smelled of a fragrance Julian had given me, a resinous incense base mixed with the cedar of his sweat. At a red light, he leaned over to fasten my seatbelt, his stubble grazing my collarbone. "Shall we check your body fat percentage?" he teased. I consented and even pleaded with them to spare Liam. In the end, Julian's persuasive words broke my resolve, and I agreed to their plan. I never imagined the arrow we fired would strike down my mother and Julian instead. On the day the police called me to identify the bodies, I was wearing Julian's favorite seductive shade of lipstick. My mother's diamond-encrusted acrylic nails were still embedded in the melted fragments of the steering wheel. Julian's right hand was clutching the severed brake line. The coroner tapped his report. "Accident. The brake system was compromised by a corrosive agent." I doubled over the counter and retched, my mind a whirlwind of confusion. I had never suspected. Isabel and Julian, together? Liam laid divorce papers on the dining table next to a restored video from the dashcam. On the screen, Isabel was straightening Julian's tie. "Once Liam is gone, we'll make Illyra disappear too," she said. "She's not my child, anyway. Then we'll take everything." I froze. I learned in that moment that I wasn't Isabel's daughter, and from Liam's account, I learned that my own father had been murdered by her and Julian. While I scrubbed the floor tiles for the third time that day, Liam was on the balcony repotting succulents, humming to himself through noise-canceling headphones. The soil under his nails looked fresher than the bruises on my knees. It was the 187th day of our silent standoff. He had purchased the small succulent last month, saying, "Give it a little sunlight, and it thrives, unlike some people, who are never content." "The soup is ready," I said, placing a clay pot on the table, positioning it so the scar on my wrist was visible. I had carved it there on his birthday last week. The blood had dripped onto the cake like raspberry jam. He never touched the tiramisu I had made. Removing his headphones, he frowned. In the kitchen, I heard the sound of disinfectant being sprayed. His chopsticks poked at the herbs in the broth, calming herbs I had purchased using his insurance card. Since the time he had caught me putting melatonin in his sports drink, he had refused to eat anything I cooked. He poured the soup into the succulents pot, the sizzling fat singed its leaves. The bathroom mirror still bore the faint trace of a blood-scrawled message from 6 months ago. That night, he had drowned. My wife, Illyra, was shattered by the simultaneous deaths of her mother and her paramour.